Yes, indeed, folks, you're listening to Blue Please here on cynicalbird.com with myself, Total Biscuit. So, I told you this was a complex affair, and I have not just rested the case with that. No, sirree, just a tiny part of it. So, let me tell you what is going on. I'm going to read some emails first, however, when I've just replied to Gnomewise in the IRC, and say hi to Gnomewise. He is around in the IRC asking me when I'm going to be off the air, apparently wants his stream back. Lovely, isn't it? So, here we go. Let's read some emails, and then we'll go into the next part of the topic, which is where things get a little bit more complicated. So, here's a resend on this one. Here we go. This one is from your self-proclaimed German listener-based spokesman, apparently, Tim from Kill Jaden. He says this: my 2 cents, in short, no matter how you assess Blizzard's behaviour and their subsequent statements, i.e. Muck's blog post, Blizzard had to choose between 2 evils. Ban Insidia to demonstrate a strict anti-exploit stance and face what they could only be described as a PR car accident, or don't, and be assailable for criticism regarding their assumed zero-tolerance stance on bug abuse. I don't agree with their decision, but I can see where they're coming from. The problem remains that no matter how they react in such a case, they only increase WoW's public awareness of their, to say the least, insufficient quality control procedures when it comes to high-end PvE content. This was true back in Blackwing Lair, it was true with Cthulhu, all the way through to TBC raid content, and remains true to this day. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And let me ask you, who put them in that situation? They did. It's their own fault. They dug themselves into a hole. Now, instead of taking the honourable way out, they took the dishonourable way out, and this is the problem I've really got with it. Instead of doing what they should have done, which is what they've done in the past, which is declare, there is an issue here, here's the hotfix, now go do it again. Or saying, you know what, we screwed up, there was a bug, they decided, no, we're going to scapegoat a guild. We're going to scapegoat the first guild to properly test the content. Properly test the content. We're not talking about Blizzard's team here. They evidently did not properly test the content. If they had, this would have never happened in the first place. That's what we have to bear in mind. Insidia often joke, and indeed so do other hardcore raiding guilds, that they are Blizzard's testing team. It's true! They are Blizzard's testing team. They're always the first there, and they always meet the lovely bugs and complete balance issues that happen, and you never see these. The vast majority of players don't see these issues because they don't get there by the time that it actually comes around, you know? We're looking at, say, the encounter, when it first comes out, and then by the time people get to it, that's all done with. It's fixed. It's all sorted out. There's no need for them to be concerned about it. Why? Because these guilds tested it, and then Blizzard fixed it. So we'll come on to what Blizzard should have done a little bit later on, but we've got a couple of other things. So here we go. Another one here. This is from Steve's. I think that Blizzard banned Insidia as an excuse to pass the blame onto them and try and cover their own backsides, as they made a faulty encounter with the boss of the expansion. I do not think Insidia knew about this bug during the encounter, and I blame Blizzard. And what annoys me the most is they got banned for something which they probably never even knew they were doing. And if GMs were watching the fight, they should have said something. Yes, that's it right there. And again, it's something that will be mentioned in when we look at the blog posts a little bit later on from Muck and Kungan. And yes, there will have been GMs and senior Blizzard raid designers watching that fight, as happens with every world first attempt. Ladies and gentlemen, this is fact. It happens. We know this happens because we've seen the results. Yeah? We've got issues with, say, when Kel'Thuzad was having issues. There were people watching the fight and they came in and fixed everything straight away. Illidan, same issue. Something bugged out, they hot fixed it and said, do it again. And of course they did. And what happened this time? Exactly the same problem. Oh look, a bug. Right. So here's the thing. There are 2 possibilities. 1, Blizzard didn't know either. In which case, how can Insidia be expected to know? Therefore, how could they have exploited meaningfully? No. Absolutely not. It's a bug that happened, and no one exploited anything. Or the other possibility is they did know, and decided not to tell them. So what, this was some kind of honeypot trap? Hey, let's deliberately introduce a bug which screws up the encounter. That's mind-boggling. Would they actually be so immature? I don't know. I hope not, because that's stupid. Right, so, those are your 2 possibilities, and either way, they acted incorrectly. Either way. There is no way that they acted correctly on this. I'm sorry, it just is not the case. Right, we've got a few things here. Hey TB, I play a bit casually, but even I use bombs on my rogue in all raids. That's because you don't suck. If you have engineering, you use everything that's at your disposal, as with any other profession. It's like saying, oh, well, I took tailoring, but I don't use the enchant. Or, say, leatherworking. Oh, I took leatherworking, but I don't use the fur lining. It's like, are you retarded? Of course you use the fur lining. Use everything at your disposal, otherwise you suck. It's as simple as that. That's why rogues use the bombs, because it's good. It doesn't cause the global cooldown to go off. It's free damage, it's high damage, it's good over the course of time, ladies and gentlemen. Now, he goes on. Considering the Lich King is a brand new raid boss with limited attempts, I think it's fair to say that any guild would do what Insidia did and adjust to what was happening. Also, I haven't done any of ICC, but it's probably way too hectic, especially in 25-man, to see that the Samurai bombs were causing the platform. Yes, it is too hectic. It's way too hectic. Even if nothing is happening in the fight, still doing loads and loads and loads of damage to a target causes spell effects to go off all over the place. Massive colours flying all over the place. That's apparently what Blizzard wants to do. Entrance people with the pretty colours and patterns, and fairy dust falls from the skies, and unicorns. They jet across the sky with rocket boosters under their backs and say, isn't this great, ladies and gentlemen? Well, it's not, because it's buggy as all hell. You can't distract people from that with pretty colours. Blizzard, you're not dealing with children here. Right. Here's the thing, and this is a nice point being brought up right here. He says this, I think it's fair to say that any guild would do what Insidia didn't adjust to what was happening. Yes, that's it. That's what they did. They adjusted to what was happening. They saw something constantly happening, and they said, well, okay, we are a min-maxing raiding guild. Like any other raiding guild, we will take advantage of what is happening right here. Remember back in Zul'Gurub? I remember back in Zul'Gurub. Bloodlord Mandakir. The original incarnation of Bloodlord Mandakir. The spikes. Yes, standing behind the spikes stopped him from charging at you. Now, that seemed perfectly reasonable. In fact, that didn't even seem like an exploit. Now, when we discovered this, we adapted our strategy. Yeah? So, we didn't have to deal with the charge. That made the fight easier. Were we exploiting? Were all the other guilds that did that exploiting? No. No, they weren't. They weren't exploiting. They were adapting to changing conditions, which is what a good raid guild does. You can't just do the same thing over and over again and expect to be successful. No, you have to be able to adapt to the changing conditions. It's the same principle, ladies and gentlemen. Exactly the same principle. If you are seeing that the Valkyrie are no longer a threat for reasons beyond your control, do you, 1, keep DPSing the Valkyrie anyway, or 2, do something more efficient? If you're a bad guild, you keep DPSing the Valkyrie anyway. Because if the threat of the Valkyrie is gone, why deal with it? Why deal with it? Now, here's the example, right? You've got these two conflicting opinions that, Exodus and Insidia got the same punishment for different encounters. Huh? So, here's one. Insidia gets banned for the Samanite bomb thing. Yeah? And what they're doing is they don't DPS the Valkyrie because the Valkyrie are no longer a threat as a direct result of this. Whereas Exodus get banned for exploiting the Yogg plus 0 thing. Who also, not a case of DPSing because these things are invincible now, but they don't deal with the Immortal Guardians because they are no longer a threat. So, what's the difference? Well, here's the difference. One of them has a distinct trigger that Exodus used and knew they used and admitted to using. Yeah? They knew what was happening with it, and they used it to stop the Immortal Guardians from attacking. Whereas you've got Insidia, who have an issue where the Valkyrie do not do what they're supposed to do. They don't know why, they don't deliberately exploit it, but they ignore the Valkyrie anyway, because they're seeing, well, what's the point? It's a difficult comparison to make, because of course you can't kill the Immortal Guardians on Yogg 0, that's the point, they're immortal. But you don't have to deal with tanking them either. So is there a difference? Well, you've got one guild that deliberately, repeatedly, got aggro from inside of Yogg Saron, where, of course, the Immortal Guardians can't hit the people who are deliberately gaining aggro. And then you've got Insidia, who are not attacking something deliberately, but they were not the ones to cause it directly. It's a fine line, but I believe the line exists between the two. One is clearly an exploit, the other is not. One is causing something to happen and then adapting your strategy accordingly, and one is seeing something happen and adapting your strategy accordingly. The difference is intent. Now, there are some people that argue that because they didn't kill the Valkyrie, that they were exploiting anyway, even if they didn't know what was causing it. I beg to differ. I'm going to be honest with you. I absolutely beg to differ on that particular point. Any guild would have done this. Why would you continue to do damage to something that is not a threat? Why would you do that? What, to go through the motions? Why? How do you know it's not part of the fight? You don't know that. You've just started this fight. You have no idea what's going on. Maybe something triggered it. You don't know what triggered it, but you're saying, hey, let's go ahead. Another example I'd like to bring up is, say, let's have a think. Yes, Shade of a Karma. Not a hard fight, but there was a bug for a very long time whereby sometimes the ads wouldn't spawn, and therefore it made the fight even more of a cakewalk than it was initially. Now, here's the question. If those ads don't spawn, do you say, oh, well, guys, sorry, we've got to wipe now because the fight isn't working as intended? Or do you take advantage of it and kill him? Which do you do? I will guarantee 99% of guilds choose option 2. They don't choose option 1. Is it unreasonable for an endgame guild, a top-of-the-top, creme de la creme guild, to adapt to this changing environment of a fight? Yes, it is. In fact, it is expected of them. It is expected of every guild to do things in the most efficient way possible. Why DPS the Valkyrie if they are not a threat? No guild would do that. No guild at all. I'm sorry, it just wouldn't happen. You could turn around and say, hey, I would do it, but you're not in that position. I don't believe you would. I think if you were put in that same position, your guild would have done exactly the same thing. Now, there's plenty of other examples of where encounters just don't work properly. What, should we wipe? Should we just wipe? No. No, we shouldn't do that at all. That's just dumb. Right, we've got some other emails on this matter, so let's keep going. Now, here we go. This one is coming from Dayster, and he says this. Greetings. Regarding the Insidia claims that the platform respawning is not important, I have to disagree. The fight is a very tight DPS race at this time, and standing on the ledge means you won't get defiled there, which means you can pump out DPS during phase 3, or 2, or whatever, and that helps you great in later phases. And others say that the Valkyries drop you on the ledge when the ledge respawns, which means the DPS race for Valkyrie is not important. Honestly, I'm not surprised to see Insidia using an exploit to get a world first. Say hello to Vash and Hodia. Right. Now, here's the problem with that argument. I totally understand that, yes, them saying that it doesn't make a big difference is kind of silly. But then you've got to bear in mind that they kind of proved the point by going back in there and killing it with ults. Ults, ladies and gentlemen, after that change. And they killed it first time with ults. Undergeared ults. Please do not tell me that it makes such a vast difference, because if it did, they wouldn't have been able to do that. So are you telling me that this difference is so huge, such a gulf, so large, that they can go back in and kill it first time with ults? It obviously isn't that big at all. If it was a vast difficulty change, then surely they'd have had to practice a bit. Surely they'd have had some difficulty with it. No, they didn't. Therein lies the problem, and that to me is proof that no, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Yes, it makes a difference, but evidently it didn't make enough to stop them. And they were going in there with a disadvantage. They were using ults, undergeared ults. Characters they don't know how to play as well as their other classes. It's a joke. Now, when it comes to Vash and Hodia, first thing, Hodia, not an exploit. You want to know why? It's as much of an exploit as that damn fire resistance, spell stealable, or in fact, in the case of old school raiding, mind control castable fire resistance buff down in LBRS. It's an inventive use of game mechanics. It's as simple as that. How is that exploiting? It's completely within the game rules. It's completely within what the game allows you to do. It allows you to pull a mob from that room to that room. And if that is the case, and then you keep spell stealing, and obviously it's supposed to give you that stacking buff, because it was there, because it was spell stealable, so who are you to say that's exploiting? It's not exploiting. It's creative use of game mechanics, but it's entirely within the framework of the game. And then when it comes to Vash, what the heck are you talking about, Vash? Vash was a buggy mess. You cannot ever claim that anyone was exploiting on that fight, because it was a joke the first time it was killed. It didn't work. You can't exploit something that's already so broken that you can't even tell what's going to happen anyway. Exploiting requires the deliberate intention to do so. You've got to know what's going to happen. If the fight is so buggy that it's totally unpredictable, and oh look, a drop of 10% in HP. Where did that come from? I don't know. Nobody knows. We still don't know where it came from. It wasn't deliberately triggered by them. Don't be absurd. We're not talking about, say, using a Hex of Weakness like the whole Alar thing back in the day. Oh, look, Hex/Curse of Weakness. Oh, look, it respawns at 50% health. That's not what happened with Vash. Vash was a mess. So don't apply the same principle to Vash, because nobody in their right mind could have actually exploited that fight deliberately. It was a mess of bugs and complete and total failure on the part of Blizzard's QA team. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com. I will be back after this. I think it's time for some strapping young lad. Yes, indeed. How about some Aftermath? Oh, yeah. I'll be back after this, folks. Enjoy.